Why the term harmony? So, we've all heard of work-life balance, but you say work-life harmony. Why is that?
I think when I heard the term work-life balance, it seems stressful. Are you finding the right balance? Look at somebody else and think they've got it right and you don't have it, or am I spending enough time or not spending enough time? So it ends up being this thing we're trying to achieve versus just have. When I think about music, it ebbs and flows, right? It gets slow, it gets fast, it gets loud, it gets soft. And that's really the way our days go. And so all the research around work-life balance is not about the quantity of time, it's the quality.
Hey, Amy, I wanted to say thanks again for taking time to chat with us today and wanted to give you kind of a chance just to introduce yourself and tell the listeners, who it is you are and what you do.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. My name is Amy Vetter. I am the CEO of the B3 Method Institute. And the B3 method is something I created. It stands for business plus balance equals bliss, in order to create what we call work-life harmony. My background is I'm a CPA. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I've had many businesses myself and currently my own as well. And then I'm also a yoga studio owner, yoga teacher, and have brought that together to create this B3 method to help others just be able to find that joy in their life each day and be intentional about it. And so the work that I do is I'm a speaker. I've written a couple books, as well as we have courses and education to help people on this journey as well.
Why the term harmony? So, we've all heard of work-life balance, but you say work-life harmony. Why is that?
So being a driven career person myself, I think when I heard the term work-life balance, it seems stressful as well, because it was one of those things that, are you finding the right balance? Look at somebody else and think they've got it right and you don't have it, or am I spending enough time or not spending enough time? So it ends up being this thing we're trying to achieve versus just have. And so I coined the term work-life harmony because my background is I am a musician growing up. I played violin and viola. I currently play bass guitar. And when I think about music, it ebbs and flows, right? It gets slow, it gets fast, it gets loud, it gets soft. And that's really the way our days go. And so all the research around work-life balance is not about the quantity of time, it's the quality. And so that could be 2 minutes and you
Mm.
can reset your central nervous system. It doesn't have to be this big thing that we're doing. It's just more, I might only have 5 minutes today, but tomorrow I have an hour and a half. And not putting stress on ourselves about it, because putting the stress on ourselves is not actually helping us achieve anything. It's more that we're able to reset our energy, let our brains just release and not think about anything for a while, except whatever we've got in front of us, and it's something we enjoy.
Yeah, because we see in, society now tells us that there has to be everything's like so linear or confined to like you have to do, hey, this morning routine combined with, this system for, whatever it is, working out or whatever. How does like the B3 method differ from these traditional ideas of like, hey, this is the framework that I have to follow? Because you kind of talked about, it's okay if I only have, X amount of time today versus tomorrow. How does it allow for that flexibility and then still let us, for some people that are more rigid, it's like, well, that much flexibility, it seems like it'd be more stressful, right? Because it's not
Mhm.
as structured. What do you say to that?
Well, it does take observation of yourself to figure it out. So, one of the things that we talk a lot about is intentional time management. Because
Mm,
if we're not intentional about our time, then it's easy for time suck to happen where it just
yeah.
goes away. We get to the end of our day, not even sure what we actually accomplished. We know we did a bunch of stuff, we're just not sure what. And so we've got courses on intentional time management, just because it is such an important thing to research about yourself. And the way I look at it is where your energy is throughout the day. So I know throughout my life that has shifted. So, it used to be when I was younger, I could work all day and then go work out and I'd have energy to do that. Being older, that's not the same anymore. Like, I wake up in the morning, I have all my energy in the morning. So I've got to be really intentional about how I structure my day based on that. So that means if I work out, I work out in the morning. As soon as I wake up, it's, but you've got to create these habits little by little. And if I'm going to do my individual work, my energy is the best to do that focused individual work in the morning. But I also know to keep my energy up through the day, that's when I'm going to set meetings with other people and, keep my energy up by interacting with others, and to not put pressure on myself to work out at the end of the day because I know I'm tired, I'm tired from work or whatever. So, what is it that I'm going to do, you know, with people I care about, friends, myself, whatever activities I need to rejuvenate at the end of the day. But I do need to make sure I am cutting off my day. So it's me creating the structure based on my own uniqueness of where my energy's at through the day. But there is a framework to it to really research yourself to determine how to flip your calendar.
No, I like that, that it's, it should be tailored to you, right? I mean, it's your
Hmm.
life, and what makes you happy or brings you harmony isn't going to be the same for other people. How did you become an accountant? Because I have my background's in accounting as well, but
Oh, really?
you talked about being a musician, and then now it's all this, like yoga instructor and
Hmm.
this it just seems uh contrary to what the typical accountant was, because I knew for me, like that was my I went that path, but then through internships, I'm like, that's not what I want to do. So I'm just curious,
Yeah.
like, what made you go into it, but then also how'd you determine that you didn't want to do that forever?
So when I was 12 years old, I was saying I was going to be a CPA, which I don't even know that I knew what a CPA was. My grandfather had been a CPA. He was an immigrant and was a CPA in the 1930s. And I grew up with stories about his practice, how it was the safe and secure career, how it helped the whole family financially. So, they were living in immigrant neighborhoods, very poor. He, went into this field that really helped the rest of his family be able to get out from where they were and also help future generations. So I always had that story in my head. And my mom did not go down that path, but I think she always felt like she should have. So she did become an art teacher, but then later opened her own business. And I think she was sorry that she didn't have the business backgrounds at that point. And so while I was playing music growing up, I also worked in her business from a very young age. So when I would get dropped off from the bus right at her office and do work till the end of the day, was really seeing both worlds happening. But by the time I was 16, she lost her business. At the time, there was the savings and loan crisis, which detrimentally affected her business, and she lost it, and I watched us lose everything. So we lost our house, we lost everything inside of our house, we had to sell it. Life changed very fast, and so I very quickly kicked in. Even though I was playing music in an orchestra, I realized I was going to be an accountant because it was a safe and secure career. And so but I also had an overriding purpose in my head about it after being part of my mom's small business of I never wanted a small business to go through what my mom's business went through. And so if I could also help that through accounting, then it really gave me more of a purpose of why I was doing it. And so I went into it and really didn't look right or left. I kept driving myself to become a partner in a CPA firm. And I eventually did when I was 32. At the moment that I became partner, I wasn't as happy as I thought I was going to be when I accomplished that. And I had another partner, managing partner, come into my office and congratulate me. And he said to me, I'm so glad to know who I'm going to retire with one day. And I was 32. So I was like, wait, it's over. This is it. So it really made me step back, reassess, my path. And I went to my therapist instead of celebrating that night and talked to my therapist about why I wasn't happy. And I realized I was really trying to achieve somebody else's dream, not my own. And that really set me on a journey. And one of the things that I talk about in my first book, Business Balance Bliss, was that it's not about quitting everything when you realize those things in your life, because we all have these like perfect storms that happen in our lives where there's a shift. And I hadn't really woken up to it before then. But when it did, the first thing you want to do is just quit, run away. I want to feel better. I don't like this. And I really talk about pivoting, because I think pivoting is really important because you have all this experience and expertise in an area, but now you have to figure out from a balance side, what do I do to bring those things together that bring me joy? And I can also incorporate my expertise. So, for example, just using accounting as an example, I have the opportunity to choose which clients I want to work with. So maybe I don't get out of accounting, but I only work with musicians and bands and or health and wellness places or whatever that is, that I'm able to still incorporate the things that I love with the expertise I have without having to completely leave something that I know. And so that was part of it. The other part at that time was I had started yoga. And the only reason I started was because I had had my youngest son, and I got really sick from the pregnancy, and the doctor wouldn't let me do my regular workouts. So he said the only thing I could do was yoga, which was not an answer I wanted. So I started yoga, and it was the first time I was really observing emotions in my body and allowing that to happen. And I started going down this yoga path as a learner because I was like, wow, I don't get this. Why does this work? Why does it feel this way? And then I became a yoga teacher, and then eventually just wanted to bring the business world together with this mindfulness piece, because there's so many things about that philosophy that really helps us in our daily life when we decide to unlock it inside of ourselves.
That's a pretty powerful message, and I think it's cool that like you talking about you don't have to just up and quit everything. There's ways to pivot your expertise is really cool because I think a lot of times we hit those moments in life and it's like, oh, I have to abandon everything or completely
Hmm.
shift, and it's like there's ways to just mildly adapt what we're doing, right? So how
Yeah.
did you at that time were you able to find what it is actually motivated you and what fulfilled you? And is it like is that moment of hey, I'm partner now, like, okay, now oh crap. It's like now I need to switch. Like what was that process like to actually okay, well let me figure out what it is I want to do and then pivot to that.
Yeah. So it's and there is no timeline to anyone doing it. It's you just have to make the decision to go through it and then see what the process uncovers, because it's been years of pivoting and making little changes. It's the little changes over time, and then you look back and you're like, wow, I've made some big changes and I didn't realize it. So the book I just released, Disconnect to Connect, is really that piece of it. And why I wrote that book was because this question kept coming up when I was writing, when I was talking about the first book, Business Balance Bliss, was how did you get there? How did you get to finding the work-life harmony? And that's really the first part, is the disconnect to connect. And that is the book about you have to do the work on yourself and really take that journey. And so that really consisted of, in my life, between deciding to go to therapy, which is a very hard decision to make sometimes. People have a lot of fear around therapy. I know in my family, it was kind of like you were weak if you went to a therapist. So I had to overcome that to walk in the door to my first meeting. I just knew I felt off and I needed to get outside help. yoga for me was a big help at the time of self-awareness and kind of the journey you go on. And it's not even intentional. I did it for exercise, but then it unlocked a bunch of things. And another tool that I think was really important during this period of time, and this is years of time, not all at the same time, was an executive coach. And really having those third parties that have no skin in the game of the outcome is really important, because I do talk about in both books how important it is to have a community of support and to communicate the things that you need to the people around you. However, like, I know my best friends are always going to be like, yeah, that's horrible. They're going to be in there with me. Where someone who's a third party is going to be like, well, let's think about that. Why do you think that happened? What could have caused that? And it started going down this path that I talk about in my current book about my belief systems. And are those beliefs mine, or were they somebody else's? And a lot of times we go through life saying truths in quotes that we believe, but when we're actually questioning those beliefs, then are they really my belief, or is that somebody else's belief that I've been saying for a long time? And now I need to reassess that as my real belief in that. And so, that was really the beginning of really trying to uncover where, things, just decisions I made, or whatever behaviors, or whatever, how I show up in the world, how was that crafted over time and by whom? And it can be just as simple as, you know, I know when I started out in accounting, there was like a clear dress code of what's successful. And then you start telling other people like that's the way you must be. And you don't realize, like, no, I don't think you need to dress that way. Like, you can be a successful accountant in jeans, like that doesn't mean you have to, be in a navy suit and, and all this other stuff. So it can be as simple as that to big belief systems that I had to unlock in myself, becoming a mom at the time, um, being where I was in my career and having seen examples of that, but realizing there were certain things that happened in my life that I was like, wait, I'm not okay to carry that on to another generation. And even though that, I talk about my personal stories in this book of just things that had happened amongst the generations in my family. And then when there's bad behaviors, it's blamed on the generation before,
Mm.
because of what they went through and so forth, and how these things get passed down. And I really wanted to take that moment to say, I want to change the paradigm for my children, for how I walk through life, and make sure I'm really aware and never be blaming the outside for the actions I take or
I,
not take.
no, I agree because it's really cool that this idea of being a cycle breaker is like taking place, and I think it's all part of this more awareness of mental health and like kind of letting
Mhm.
go of those past traumas. But it's super positive, and it's like I became a father in the past few years, and it's like
Oh,
it's
congrats.
really cool that now all this information and these kind of people are out there to help support the idea of like it's okay to not keep passing on these bad traits that happened in prior generations.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even realize it's happening. It's just what you've always seen, how to punish, how to talk to people, all of those things, especially as a new parent. And I think there's nothing more in your face than when you become a parent and you're like, wait, I'm not okay with that. Like, that's just the only thing I ever knew.
Right.
But now, how do I craft that for myself? And that can be the same in the workplace, as you see yourself reacting in a certain way, or not reacting, or not speaking up, or, not getting work done on time, or whatever those habits are. The first thing is really to identify what are the things that are barriers for you, or getting in your way, or these little things that you notice. And you have to be okay to notice it, to recognize it, and call it out, right? And I think that's really the first step. And realize, from a mindfulness perspective, you're not judging yourself about it, you're observing yourself about that habit, and it's like research. So if you can take yourself outside of blame and judgment, and instead be like, well, you know, I'm always having this problem of getting things in by a deadline. So what is causing that? And then I need to look at, well, what are the triggers that cause that? And recognize like, oh, I might, be saying yes to too many things, or I, feel bad if I tell someone no, or I tell them I've got other things to do, or maybe that came from being a people pleaser when you were younger, and then, where that actually came from, and then trying to set up your environment, because in order for us to change a habit, we have to actually change our neural channels, because they've been built that way over and over and over. It's a repetition in our life. It's a behavior that is repeating itself. So we have to be intentional of creating what is that pathway to make sure that I'm going to break that habit. So I'm going to make sure next time my manager comes to me and says, "What I need to do," I need to remember to speak up and say, "I'm working on this. Which one is more important?" So I make sure I get it on time. And what would be the next due date for that? Let's make that decision together. And now I've got to practice how to speak up, how to have that conversation, and start getting comfortable with it, because it's going to be uncomfortable when I do it initially, but then realize how much better that's making my time management, my relationships. I'm not disappointing people when I don't intend to disappoint people, and so forth. So all of our actions come back to 100% responsibility of what could I have done differently, and then if I'm intentional about how I'm going to walk through that and change that going forward.
I don't want to make assumptions here, but in the book, Disconnect to Connect, when you say disconnect, you talk about disconnecting from daily pressure. Is this kind of what you're alluding to here, where it's like, you know, starting to set boundaries, not only in personal life and those
Mhm.
relationships, but also at work? Is that truly what you mean by disconnect? Because I take the word disconnect as like, well, I'm going to go to like some cabin in the woods somewhere and not have technology. But what do you
Yeah.
mean? What do you mean by disconnect?
Well, it is creating space. It's creating stillness, right? And so the only we have to find how we do that. And
Mm.
so that could be meditation, that could be listening to music, that could be going out for a run, whatever allows us to clear our mind and create space. Because a lot of times we solve these things, or we like something we can't solve when we're pushing and pushing and pushing ourselves at work. When we get still or remove ourselves from the situation, all of a sudden we're solving it. We don't even intend to solve it sometimes. Like our brain is allowed to just do its thing and process. And so it's important that we take this time to find time in our day to get still, and to really be intentional about our energy, and to give ourselves space to work, to create, to think. Whether that's blocking time out on our calendar to do that, whether it's how we set meetings to make sure there's space between our meetings and we're not just snowballing our meetings all day. But whatever that is that we need to do to be intentional about our day and give ourselves space to just have some stillness and let our mind just process.
So once we've figured out what it is that like allows that stillness for us, what's the next step in understanding what it is that is truly our passion? I think for a lot of people, and myself included, and it's like when you start down your journey and you're doing things for other people's expectations, kind of like you talked
Hmm.
about with accounting, and the same reason that I went into it. It's like you're doing these things because you think it's what you're supposed to do, and then
Hmm.
that's like later in life you realize that's not. So it becomes hard to then determine what it is you
Hmm.
really want. So how do you talk to people about, hey, I've created this stillness now, I've kind of disconnected. Now how do I figure out for myself what it is I want to do?
Yeah. So I think that's what happened. It's funny. I just had this conversation with my son who switched his major in college. The same son of why I started on this journey. This is where, and I actually talked to a whole group of college students about this a week ago, that I think so much our focus when we choose majors is about the major, the career, the title, the thing, but it's not about the value we want to create in the world. And so when we step back and do the work ourselves, it's important that we understand our personal purpose. And the way I look at personal purpose is, you know, the value I want to create in the world and who do I want to create that for? So going back to what I said about my mom's business, even though I knew accounting was a safe and secure career, I also knew that my overriding personal purpose was to make sure small business owners didn't go out of business because I wanted to make sure they could still create in the world and benefit the customers that come through their doors. So that was my overriding personal purpose, right? And I have to really dig inside myself to figure out what that is that drives me. And I was just talking to my son about it because he switched majors. And I had said to him, it's not just about the major. If you know the value you want to create in the world, then if you have a bad class, a bad first job, whatever it is, your longer term vision that you're doing all these things to get to the value you want to create. So it actually helps you align your career better based on that. And for me, that value has always stayed the same, that even though I might not do personal CPA work anymore, when I speak to accountants, when I speak to small businesses, I'm still helping entrepreneurs and businesses be able to create what they want in the world by what I'm teaching, by what I'm educating on, and find that joy. So I know I'm still on that path. I've just pivoted in the work on the way to solve for that value, right? And so when I saw myself as a CPA and I started pivoting even the work I did as a CPA, instead of doing audit, which is where I started, but then I started doing work that was more advisory and consulting to small businesses and being more hands-on and understanding what the business's issues were. All that other work I did to get there was so I could get to that moment of helping small businesses. And then when I started seeing, oh, when I train accountants, I'm getting to more small businesses than just one-to-one. So then
Mm.
that started expanding my reach. And then each pivot would start working that way. So I think people don't take the time to actually understand what is it that I want to create in the world and why. And a lot of times when I do this work with people, it may not even be that. It might be the value I want to create is for my family. So I want to be able for them to have a good life, for us to enjoy our life together. So the work actually creates that value. So then if there's something I'm unhappy with at work, I can say, yeah, but it's creating the value I want. If I am working 10 to 12 hours a day and I'm moving away from my family because I don't have time to be with them, I've now gotten away from my personal purpose. And either I have to shift my work schedule and make it work, or I have to find something else that will still be able to achieve that personal purpose. Does that make sense?
It does. I just want to get very specific when we think about the personal purpose, like while we're
Hmm.
in the heat of this conversation.
Yeah.
Is there what's the easiest way for someone to figure out what that is? Do you think it's like, hey, I need to go through this questionnaire? Is it really thinking about like what makes me happy? What is it that defines someone's personal purpose?
So it is the value that I want to create in the world and who do I want to create it for?
So you think
So
it's just asking yourself that question?
asking those questions to yourself, and it might go through iterations, but a lot of times in your gut, you know what that answer is.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people want to like spend all this time on it, but like immediately you knew something came to your head when I said that. So for you, what came to your head?
No, it's about yeah, for me it's always been about helping people. And I know that mine is
Yeah.
about I build businesses because for the employees. And it's
Hmm.
probably not the right way to do it, but it's like to
No,
me, I get so much more joy out of creating an environment that someone can then take care of their family and things like that
yeah,
for. And I found out that like I thought I wanted these big businesses for the notoriety or the money, but it's actually for me, it's about then I can build these relationships with all these people and feel like I'm making an impact in communities through providing a great place to work. It's like,
right,
but for some people, it's hard to admit it or identify exactly what it is, and because sometimes it's big and it's scary, right? So how do you get
right.
someone to say it's okay to put out there what it is your purpose is?
Yeah, and I think just for your example, like someone else's example could be to create money.
Right.
You're creating enough money to be able to support these employees, and but if it's no longer supporting those employees, or you're not then you've got to step back and rework your business or what you're doing, or is
Yeah.
this achieving it, right? And some of those times for me, like even in the work I do now, like I've made more money in certain jobs that I've had, but I really stepped back with this and was like, but the value I'm creating that I've always wanted to create in the world, I'm doing that. So how much money do I have to make in order to keep doing that? Like I don't have to just make all the money in the world. That's not what's creating happiness for me. What's creating happiness for me is the fulfillment and the work that I'm doing, for others. And so it's an important thing to understand between the difference of money, title, whatever that is in your head, because it is important to know what drives you. Because if you don't achieve that, you're always going to be unhappy. You're going to be complaining about the work you're doing. You're going to be complaining about your customers. You're going to be doom and gloom each day. And that energy is contagious. So if I show up upset, stressed, tired, just feeling negative, when I come into this situation, that's going to come onto you. And then you're going to start, well, yeah, this really does suck. And then that whole energy in the room just, so we have to personally take accountability to monitor, like if we're feeling off, and that's sometimes where meditation can be very helpful in getting
Yeah.
silent, is that when we truly, get into a meditative state, it's about observing those thoughts that come up for you that you're like, wait, that's in there? I didn't even realize I was thinking that or feeling that. That's interesting. So now when I'm out of meditation, what do I do with that observation I've just had of myself? How do I reset myself to make sure that isn't the energy I'm creating during the day? Or I go into a meeting and have a bad meeting with someone and I don't even realize that's happening inside of my body. So I blame that person instead of really being clear on why I showed up the way that I did.
Well, I mean, finding that clarity is should be the ultimate goal. Because to expand on what you were talking about, I always think it's interesting how we define success. Because it's like
Mhm.
if you do it for this title, if you do it to become partner, if you do it to become, hey, I want to make X amount of dollars. Once you reach it, there's an emptiness there. But
Yeah.
if your success is defined by fulfilling this purpose driven passion, then you can always do it. You can always be successful. You can always be working towards it.
Yeah, there's always somewhere else you can go with it and pivot, right? I mean, I talk about disconnect to connect, exactly that question that happened in my career. It was when I was, you know, jumping different levels, through my career. And one of the things I would notice about myself is I could have a feedback evaluation by my manager, and 99% of it would be awesome. And that 1%, I would just be hyper like, how could they think that, whatever, and be really down on myself. Now, I could have gotten the promotion, I could have gotten the raise I wanted, but I'm focused on like that piece of the feedback. And I had a manager that was actually a good friend and kind of went through this process with her. And then she stepped back and said, well, you just got the promotion you wanted, you just got the raise, we gave you a really good evaluation. What is it that would make you happy? And I kinda sat there and I was like, "I don't know." I thought it was this title, I thought it was this next promotion, and I was really caught off guard by the question, which seems like a simple question, right? And so later on, and this is a long time later, like, probably 20 years later, my oldest son was going to college. And when I had gone to college, I had gone through a lot of hard stuff growing up. So I went to orientation by myself. I didn't have any family with me. I was trying to figure out college on my own. But I remember I had this moment where I went to University of Cincinnati, and where orientation was, you kind of walk up this hill and there's Nippert Stadium where the football team plays. And I got up to the top of the hill and I was looking over the stadium and I was like, I'm going to change my life. You know, this is the beginning of it. Like, I couldn't wait to start college. Like, I thought this was, the thing that was going to overcome things for me. So I had taken my son to orientation and we walked up that hill, and all of a sudden we got to that point. And I'm like, oh my God, stop. And I had him turn around and I was like, I need to take a picture right here. And I took a picture of him right where I stood at Nippert Stadium that day. And I was like, this is what makes me happy. I'm like, all this work was so he could finally get here to achieve his dream. Like, I am so happy to be here with him. He feels supported on his journey. And he's going to go, he's, in environmental engineering, also very passionate about what he wants to create for the world. And I was like, this was it. I couldn't answer that 20 years ago,
Mm.
and sometimes we're looking at happiness as a thing versus like really what's important in our life, and we don't get there maybe for a while in our lives as we mature, but it was definitely something I had overlooked at the time.
That was a really cool story. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's like that's why I chose the name of this podcast. What it was like it's the in pursuit of better because
Hmm.
you're always pursuing it. Like
Yes.
happiness isn't this thing that you just achieve one day and all of a sudden,
Right.
it's like. But I think we get that misconception a lot. But it's the journey that's magical, and success and happiness throughout your life is going to change. Those targets change for everybody. So that's why
Yeah.
I think it's cool. Like you know, the ideas that you put forward, this work life harmony, this balance to everything is what's key for people. And I'm sure it's taken you a while to figure all that out, but it's
Oh,
nice
for
that you've put it in paper form for us to enjoy and to learn from you. Is that why you wrote the book? Is like, hey, I was getting so many questions about this, but like I have this now that I can share with the world.
Yeah, well, I wanted to, like you said, kind of create this framework of the B3 method because I think it's easier for people to visualize in their self and put those buckets together. I am an accountant, so formulas are good for me.
Did
To
you put it
think
in an
like
Excel spreadsheet?
that. Yeah.
That's how I do. I use
Yeah.
Excel for everything.
Yes, exactly. Um, so, and I think what you're saying is really, the key that I talk about in here is that there's never an end. No one becomes like the work-life balance queen. It's,
Right.
like you literally have things happen in your life and it shakes you again. Like there's so many uncontrollables in life. Things can be going great, and then all of a sudden something happens and throws you off. So what's important to me, and I think what I've learned over time, is being aware, having that awareness of when I feel off, being accountable to when I feel off, and then letting people know I feel off, being transparent about it. And then what are the things that I need to do to offset that? So, I mean, there's times things are really hard. I've gone through this year a big move, and my kids empty nesting, like all of that stuff is really big life changes that you can't even predict how it'll feel until it happens. And so there's moments where I'm aware that I'm going through that process, and that's what I've learned through this, right? So I'm aware when I feel off, and then I'm going to say to myself, you know what? I'm going to give myself a time frame to just feel sorry for myself. I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I'm allowed to have those moments, right? Like, everyone's always trying to like push you to feel, like, if you can have moments to not feel okay, and give yourself permission. It's where you give yourself boundaries around it and then say, I'm only going to do it for this long. And then I got to kick into gear, right? Like, things are going to fire up again. I need to make sure I'm back on my workout schedules. I need to make sure I'm seeing my therapist. I always feel therapy is a good maintenance thing, even when things aren't bad, because when you need it, it's like insurance. Like, it doesn't
Hmm.
just happen. You need to be someone out there observing things even when things are okay, and so to doing all of those things to stay aware so that I show up for the people I care about, and as a business owner for the people that work for me as well, in a way that I want to show up versus letting things just happen and then being like, well, why do they think of that of me?
Well, yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's like, and I could be reading this wrong, but it seems like the messages that we get off, social media or the news, and it's like we're almost afraid to have emotions because we're supposed to portray this life that's like you
Mhm.
said, oh, I'm going to become this work-life balance, perfectionist, where it's like everything's so, you know, just perfect in its alignment. And it's like that's just not realistic. Like things do come up, and I think it's just important to let people know that it's okay to have bad days. It's okay
Yeah,
to admit that you need help. Like we should be talking to therapists, not just waiting until the point where we're at a point of no return. It's like,
right.
self-maintenance, self-preservation is important.
Mhm. And having the rituals in your own life to make sure that you are figuring out what you need to do with your energy. If you're tired, what kind of breathing exercises can you do to offset that? Or do you need to go take a walk? Do you need to go eat
Mm.
something that, is good for your body?
Oh, okay. Because
But,
I usually go eat something. That's usually my answer. Yeah.
yeah. But something that will shift things, for you so you can get yourself back to an equilibrium, you know, way throughout your day.
Absolutely. So where can everybody find the book and find out more about you and follow along?
Yeah, so if you go to amyvetter.com, it's Vetter, you can find all about my speaking, my books, my podcasts, all the articles and blogs we do. You can sign up for a newsletter there. And then I'm on social media, really on any social channel at Amy Vetter CPA. And you can find me there.
Amy, can't thank you enough. This was awesome.
Thank you.
You shared a lot of great insights. So I appreciate it.